Saturn enters Aries today, February the 13th, marking the beginning of a powerful new cycle around power, initiation, anger, leadership, and the masculine principle. So I want to talk today about something that can be uncomfortable. I want to talk about masculinity. And before you click away, this isn't a takedown, this is an invitation. Because Saturn in Aries is a transit that's not just about ambition or drive, it's about how we use power and whether the fire we're carrying is sacred or distorted. And we've become accustomed to a very loud version and a very false version of the masculine principle. It's a version that pushes, that competes, that dominates. It's a version that equates strength with hardness. And yet, if we're honest, it doesn't feel very strong. It feels anxious. It feels like it's trying very hard to prove itself. And here's what's important. This isn't a man problem. When we're speaking about the masculine principle, when we're speaking about toxic masculinity, we are not speaking only about men. We are speaking about a human pattern. This distorted masculine lives in all of us, men and women alike. So it shows up when we feel insecure. It shows up when we feel unseen, when we need to win in order to feel worthy. And Saturn, by the way, does not let distortion go unexamined for long. And Saturn is going to be in Aries for 3 years. So this is raw initiating fire that's activated in Aries. And we are asked to mature how we act. We are asked to revisit and reconsider how we assert ourselves, how we lead, how we carry or hold our anger, and how we carry desire. This is not about suppressing masculinity. This is about refining the masculine. You know, there is such a thing as the sacred masculine, and I want to talk about the sacred masculine here. It's very, very different, the sacred masculine, from what we've normalized. Now, let's remember, and this really is about remembering. There was a time when we were all in touch with the sacred masculine. The sacred masculine is not abusive. It's not heartless. It's not cold. True masculine energy is confidence without domination. It's rational thinking without the need to control. It's strength without cruelty. It's courage without performance. It's stable. It's protective. It's loyal. It's constant. And here's something that not many people seem to know. The sacred masculine delights in movement, particularly play and sport, and it provides structure and it holds. How do you know when you are expressing the sacred masculine? Well, you know it when you're clear and focused, when you're acting in alignment with your vision, when you're moving towards your dreams without sacrificing yourself or others in the process, right? It's when you're getting things done. That's the energy. Sacred masculine gets things done, but it doesn't destroy in order to do so. That is the difference. So, Saturn in Aries is going to expose where we are misusing our fire and where we are not aligned with the sacred masculine, where we are reverting to the toxic or false masculine. Neptune, by the way, has recently moved into Aries, and illusion around masculinity is dissolving. Neptune's going to be in Aries for a long time, 30 years, so it's going to be a process. But believe me, by the end of Neptune's transit, the world is going to be a better place, a different place. Now, Saturn in Aries is for sure going to trigger or bring up issues around the father wound. And before we get into this whole father complex, father wounds, I just want to mention something that Bell Hooks pointed out. She said that men have been engaged in acts of psychic mutilation. They've been cutting off their emotional lives in order to perform masculinity. I'll repeat that. Men have been engaged in acts of psychic self-mutilation, cutting off their emotional lives in order to perform masculinity. And by the way, they don't only engage in psychic acts of self-mutilation, they're also physical acts of self-mutilation in order to not feel. And sons having inherited this from their fathers, fathers inherited it from their fathers, and so on for centuries. Saturn in Aries is the hand that's going to come up like this and say, okay, where does this lineage stop? Where does this stop? When does it end? Okay, now let's get to this father complex. Psychologically, this can show up as a lifelong longing for approval or guidance. One of the surest ways to know if you have a father wound is when you are constantly looking for approval or guidance. Another way is when perfectionism is rooted in fear of authority, when you are emotionally disconnected, and when you tend to explode with anger. It's anger that you've been suppressing, and then you explode with anger. Now, for daughters, this can manifest as the eternal girl, which in Jungian psychoanalysis is known as the puella eterna complex, which means you're still chasing father's approval in romantic partners, in mistaking dominance for strength. And for sons, of course, it manifests as confusion around masculinity, and it swings between this passiveness or passivity and rage. Now, Saturn in Aries is not here to shame this. We're not going to be shamed by this, okay, if we have a father complex or a father wound. Saturn here is going to help us sort through this, deal with it. We hear a lot about the feminine, and why we've been hearing so much about the divine feminine, the sacred feminine, is because, and I think this is important to point out because people don't seem to understand, it's not about fighting back. It's about equilibrium. It's about restoring balance and also following natural law. But anyway, let's not get into that. The feminine is seeking equilibrium, the feminine inside each and every one of us, which is the creative, intuitive, relational, and fluid side of each and every single one of us, is seeking equilibrium and wants to integrate. It wants to integrate. Again, I'm not talking about just collectively. Everything starts individually with the individual. But without a mature, true, healthy masculine, the feminine cannot feel safe enough to open fully. And of course, without a healthy feminine, the masculine becomes rigid and disconnected from the heart. And so, it makes me think that we are all living in fragmentation, which is true. All of us are living in fragmentation. It reminds me of what the Kabbalists call tikkun, which is the soul's work of piecing itself back together, which is what we're all here to do. We're just shards of light, and we're just picking up all these little shards and putting ourselves back together. And Saturn in Aries is part of this work of repair, of reconstruction. Now, someone who embodied the divine, sacred, masculine, true masculine was Jesus. It doesn't matter what your faith is. You don't have to be Christian. Just look at Jesus' life as an example of the true masculine. Jesus was fierce and loving. He was an embodiment of love. Love, love, love. This is important to remember about the divine masculine. Love is part of the divine masculine. Yes, and the divine feminine. But love is divinely masculine, protective and compassionate. Just think about, for example, if you know your Bible, I think it was Matthew 21. I stand to be corrected here. But anyway, Matthew 21, when Jesus went into the temple and he chased out the vendors and money changers, money. Yeah. He chased them out. He overturned tables. He was furious. Why did he do this? Because he held boundaries. It's also a very masculine quality. And Jesus was known to have wept many times. He wept and he also healed. That is sacred masculine. Fiercely protective of life, loyal, courageous, constant, and heart-centered. So Saturn in Aries is asking, can your strength be rooted in love? And can your fire serve life instead of ego? Over the next few years, you may notice confrontation with authority figures. You're already aware of this if you are following the news and stuff. It's just going to increase over the next 3 years. More confrontation with authority figures, old anger surfacing, a desire to reclaim your independence, and of course, as I touched on earlier, issues around your father or father figure and issues around leadership and identity. Aries, the shadow side of Aries is loud, destructive, arrogant, and so toxic masculinity, destructive. But it is also the sign where things come to life, where we all come to life. And so Saturn here is teaching us disciplined courage, sustainable strength, and embodied leadership. This isn't about suppressing the masculine. Okay, I hope I've made this clear. It's actually about embodying the true masculine. It's about refining it. Now, most of us cannot rewire our father wounds or distorted masculine patterns alone. Saturn in Aries is initiatory. He's going to ask you to grow up in very specific places, especially around power, anger, leadership, and self-trust. If you are feeling this transit already, if you are noticing old authority wounds surfacing, if you are ready to reclaim your strengths without becoming hard, without disconnecting, this is precisely the kind of work I do with my clients. I work astrologically and psychologically. We look at your birth chart, where Mars lives, where Saturn lives, your relationship to the sun, your relationship to the father archetype, and we track what is being activated now. We don't just analyze, we work somatically, we work symbolically, and we work with meaning together. Okay, this is how we stop reenacting inherited patterns and begin embodying coherent strength. If that calls to you, I have space for private astrologically guided coaching, and you can find the link below. Okay, I would love to hear from you. How has the masculine, healthy or distorted, shaped your life? What did you inherit from your father or authority figures? And maybe you want to journal this. You might not want to, comment about this, but what would a mature, integrated masculine feel like in your body? If this resonates, stay with me. Saturn's journey through Aries is going to unfold slowly, and we are going to track it together because this isn't just astrology. This is the work of coming back into coherence, and that work begins within. Thank you for being here. Please do remember to subscribe and like if you want to see me again.